to everyone watching. My name is Mohammed Dada, and for today I'm going to be presenting our conference paper titled What's in a Name? Pre-Crime Biases in Generative AI. So let's jump right into it. Firstly, name biases in general across different research domains, and especially in the context of AI, is a critically understudied issue. And names, if you stop and think about them, are a very ubiquitous data field. They are collected in all manner of software applications and web forms, and names are essential labels which also form part of the identity of a person. So, if there are a lot of biases surrounding names, the potential for harm is quite vast and immediate. And names at their core, especially also at a conceptual level, are not neutral labels. They encode implicit information about our race, ethnicity, caste, gender, and also religion. Previous research has shown that applicants with immigrant names tend to face significantly greater difficulty securing employment and housing. And as large language models grown have grown in their prominence and in their usage, and are also trained vastly on large amounts of data, which contains names, the potential for name-based biases existing in large language models is high, and as large language models are increasingly integrated into software applications, which also form part of many decision-making processes, there is a vast potential for these models to further perpetuate and amplify the social inequalities surrounding names. And our study is going to investigate how ChatGPT associates crimes with racialized names, revealing patterns that unfortunately align with harmful stereotypes. So, before jumping into our research's findings, let's have a quick overview of the research design. So, in terms, firstly, of the data set, we source all of our data from the 2010 United States Census data, and we sample 500 names in total, 100 for every one of the five official races present in the United States Census data, which is white, black, Asian, Hispanic, and Native. And for our selection process, we employ a Bayesian approach, which helps us to select from the whole corpus of names present what are the most distinctive names and also what are the most popular names from a frequency perspective. Then, one of the core vehicles of our research is that we employ prompt engineering techniques to elicit outputs from models through inferences. And we do this by setting a system prompt inside of all of our prompts where we inform the model that it is to behave as a court judge. And we vary the prompts which we employ through two variations. One variation has just a name present inside of the prompt without any racial information, and the second variation of prompt has race explicitly present in the prompt. And we also scale our outputs and research by performing 5 inference cycles for every prompt name combination. And as a result of all of that, we end up with an output data set of 7,500 generated outputs, which we then analyze. For the analysis, we employ qualitative analysis and categorization, which is performed by all of the authors participating and collaborating in our research study. And we categorize based on the FBI's offense definitions. And through our qualitative analysis, we achieved a reliability of 85% on Cohen's inter-rater agreement measure, thereby lending high reliability to our qualitative results. So, the first finding of our research, first and foremost, is that identity theft across both of the prompt types is the most commonly associated and commonly generated crime. And this serves as one of our baseline associations, associating models to the crimes which they generate. And Then, inside of our second prompt variation, when explicit racial prompts are introduced, there is a marked increase in torts like racial discrimination and cultural civil offenses, which are not even, which are in many cases not considered as official crimes, blurring blurring the line between crimes and civil issues. And at a high level, we also observe that name only prompts favor financial crimes such as embezzlement, while explicit race prompts shift associations towards more violent crimes, such more violent crimes and also immigration offenses. Um, and now let's maybe take a moment and dive deeper into the outputs given name only prompts, also further showcased graphically to to showcase the racial distributions for different crimes which are generated. So from this graph and also from the results displayed, we can observe quite a few stereotypes which are especially prevalent in the large language models generations. So firstly, with Asian names, there is a 74 to 175% higher likelihood of generating financial fraud crimes and also generally a higher likelihood of intellectual property crimes, such as counterfeiting and so on. Then, on the other hand, with Hispanic names, we see a marked increase in crimes such as drug trafficking, money laundering, and grand theft auto, which once again also further disseminates a stereotype associated with the Hispanic population. With native names, we observe that burglary, for example, is associated twice as often as other races. For black names, we very interestingly and critically observe that they are exclusively associated with environmental crimes, and these results also change as we head into prompt 2 results on the next slide. And finally, with white names, they are almost exclusively associated with vandalism. Now, as we shift over into prompt number 2, where race was explicitly introduced inside of the prompt, we observe generally an amplification of the racialization associated with different crimes and also the emergence of new categories of crimes. And we also see this represented graphically where each of the colors representing the race are a lot more pronounced, and there's a higher variance in terms of the outputs for different crime categories. We see especially that violent crimes get predominantly attributed to black and Hispanic names, reinforcing these deeply rooted stereotypes. And we also see the emergence of some non crimes, such as cultural appropriation, which gets attributed to the native names, and racial discrimination getting attributed to Black and Asian names. A critical finding in with this prompt is that the model conflates victims and perpetrators, failing to distinguish between those who commit crimes and those who experience discrimination, for example. The implications of our research and of our findings are many. As large language models get more and more embedded and integrated in not just software systems but workflows in general, there is an increased possibility of racial profiling resulting as a result of the biases present in large language models. And these biased associations between names and specific crimes, which are embedded in the models, can lead to unfair risk flagging in predictive policing tools, for instance. And the racial profiling is also, for example, not limited just in the domain of policing, but it could also occur in situations of loan applications, for example. And as a result, we would end up with a situation of disproportionate surveillance, with certain racial groups being targeted for increased scrutiny based on biased AI outputs, and these would only further amplify real and existing systemic inequalities outside of AI in the physical world. And Another use case of AI where large language models are used for document analysis or evidence interpretation would also potentially have an implication on biasing the legal system and skew the legal process. And all of these three serve as examples of all of the wrongful outcomes which are possible and which we also don't cover in their entirety. And the recommendations for mitigation for these biases, which we have discovered surrounding names, are the following. So, one approach would be to implement very rigorous audit checks and debiasing strategies in the forms of guardrails in AI model deployment throughout the whole AI development lifecycle, going all the way from data pre-training to final fine-tuning. And such anti-bias protections should not just be added as a post-training fix, but also be present as a balancing measure in the data pre-training process. Secondly, we also emphasize the importance and need for context-specific AI model evaluation. So, AI models should not be evaluated for safety just at the model level, but they should also be evaluated for bias in specific downstream tasks, like what we have done in our research study with crime prediction, instead of just relying solely on very abstract embeddings based AI model bias metrics and evaluation frameworks. Lastly, we also emphasize the need for a more nuanced data selection in the pre-training process of large language models so that the data which is pre-trained on in the first place can account for social and educational backgrounds and name selection to avoid reinforcing further deep-seated sociological biases. And now let's take a moment to discuss the limitations and future directions of our research. So our study is limited in scope in that we only are analyzing the crime associations associated with names within the context of the ChatGPT model. We selected this model because it is the most popular and widely used AI service, but as other competitors such as Gemini and Cloud are coming onto the scene, it would be very interesting to observe the inherent and indirect biases present there. Our study is also limited in terms of the data because the United States Census lacks, for example, Arab names and also tends to simplify complex racial identities by including just five buckets for categorizing race, being white, black, Hispanic, Asian, and native. And lastly, our study may not apply to universally all large language models as we are just testing on the single most popular model. And moving on then, in terms of the future directions that our research can take, definitely, as mentioned previously, the data sets can be expanded. We could curate a custom data set for Arab names and other underrepresented groups. And we could also further grow the models which we include inside of our comparison study to include Gemini, Claude, and also open source models, which are growing in popularity due to being a lower cost alternative to proprietary closed source models. It would also be especially interesting to investigate the name based bias implications within hiring context, as employment is a primary concern for many people, and especially as large language models are also getting integrated into applicant tracking system software. Finally, it would also be interesting to further expand domains into personality assessment and professional competence use cases of large language models. And lastly, to close off our presentation today, we'd like to take a brief look at our conclusions and reflect upon them. So, firstly, our findings have shown that stereotypical biases and associations do exist in large language models, and they are not limited also to explicit mentions of race, but they are also highly implicit and indirect and encoded within the names which people hold. And even without explicit racial prompts, we've seen that large language models are disproportionately associating, for example, especially non white names with crimes such as identity theft, bribery, fraud, and thereby mirroring these widespread societal stereotypes. And then we have also observed with our findings that introducing race as a context further amplifies the bias with with a higher degree of pronunciation of the variance, which we have observed inside of the graph results of our categorization of crimes by race. And unfortunately, we also found that racial context actually, when provided to the model within the prompt, does not mitigate bias as it should, but it actually worsens it. And associations shifted towards violent crimes for Black and Hispanic names and also populations, and introduced civil offenses for others. And lastly, our study and our research as a whole have also shown that safeguards are insufficient. The existing safeguards are insufficient for anti biases fine tuning, and large language models are continuing to reflect these deep seated prejudices. And the current mitigation techniques against biases and against racism are simply not robust enough to handle the indirect biases which are introduced with names. And with the publication of our research, we are hoping that it serves as an urgent call to action for responsible AI deployment, for responsible AI development. We are reaching out to the research community to further improve context-specific metric evaluation for AI and to expand investigation into especially the critically understudied indirect biases surrounding name encodings, and also to increase research in AI model audit mechanisms that go beyond the standard benchmarks. We are also hoping that our research serves as a call to action for policymakers to establish and grow regulatory frameworks surrounding safe AI and mandate comprehensive AI model bias testing before these systems are deployed in high stake domains such as justice and hiring. And finally, we also are trying to reach out to the industry to adopt responsible AI practices that are transcending the surface level bias, anti biasing strategies, and compliance, and really dig deep into debiasing models also at the name level, ensuring transparency and equity ensuring transparency and equity getting built into the AI development lifecycle. And with this, I would like to close and end the presentation. Thank you very much to everyone who has listened in for your attention. And we look forward to welcoming your questions inside of a forum, or you can also reach out to us via email. Thank you very much for your time and have a lovely day.